Generative AI, like any technology, comes with a set of risks. Problem is, we're not so clear as to what those risks are. How do we approach a much desired technology we're not so sure how we should secure?
You're listening to Defense in Depth.
Welcome to Defense in Depth. My name is David Sprock. I'm the producer of the CISO series, and joining me for this very episode, you've heard him before, and whether you like it or not, you're going to hear him again. It's Jeff Belknap. He's the CISO of LinkedIn.
Oh, hey, that's me. Yes. Hello. Welcome.
Do you think there's anyone listening to the show that does not like the sound of your voice, and every time they hear it, they go, "Oh, it's Jeff again"?
I listen to the show, and I can assure you that is exactly my reaction every time.
Most people hate the sound of their own voice. That is true. People squirm. They're like, "Oh, do I sound like that? Ooh, that sounds gross." Our sponsor for today's episode is SpyCloud, the new way to disrupt cybercrime. We'll tell you exactly how they're doing it and how they can help you later on in the show. Jeff, our topic of discussion today, understanding and managing risk is one of the primary jobs of a CISO, right? We talk about it like all the time. So this can be challenging enough with an established technology, but with the rapid rise of generative AI, we're only starting, and I mean really only starting to understand the risks it can present. No one wants to fall behind by not using a potentially disruptive technology, so people do want to use generative AI. So how can we take what we've learned from past technical advances and actually apply it to mitigate risks with generative AI? And is that the tactic to take, or is this a whole new ball of wax? What do you think, Jeff?
I think in most cases, you're just applying lessons that you've learned in other situations against new technology. And at the beginning, that's always the case. You don't have a point of reference on something brand new. And this, in most cases, is just SaaS. It's just software, and you're talking about data you're putting into it and how to manage that risk. And you know what? I think our guest today is going to be a great asset to fleshing out this conversation.
I'm going to introduce our guest in a second, but I just want to sort of qualify and say that I've gone to a lot of conferences lately, of which there's always a generative AI session, and everyone enters that session with this high hopes of, oh, well, this is going to be the session where the person knows everything and will give me all the answers.
The Konami code, the cheat code to get you through it.
Does not exist. And as awesome as our guest is, I don't think he's that person either. He does not have the code for us. You don't either, do you?
I feel like the code is hard work, but I'm going to wait to hear what our guest says.
He may surprise us and say, "You're wrong. I do have the code.
I'll take it.
But I'm keeping it. I'm not telling you." We had this gentleman on earlier. I'm going to give him a little bit of buildup. We had this guest on earlier, and I'm going to take some credit for his success because he's actually made quite a brand name for himself in media. Now doing LinkedIn learning sessions as well about becoming a security leader. I was the one who actually recommended his very first microphone, which he uses a different one now. But I don't know if we were his first podcast. We can find out that later. But he has done really well, and he's been an excellent guest, and I'm thrilled to have him back on again. And he's just the brand new CISO over at WM, Jarek Beeson. Jarek, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be back. Thank you for setting the bar low for expectations. And also thank you for my first mic. At this point, I just write posts on LinkedIn in hopes for enough engagement to make it on one of your shows.
Well, let me ask you a question. We've quoted you umpteen times, Jarek. Jarek, were we your first podcast?
You were my second podcast. You wouldn't have let me on if you didn't see me on a previous podcast.
Ah, there you go. That is a good point. Yeah, that does happen sometimes. I'm glad I waited because God,
David, you got to take a risk on some people.
Yeah, I can't take a risk on you, Jarek.
Yeah, well, this is a mistake you're still paying for.
How do I start?
Sandesh Mysore Anand of Razorpay said, quote, "The first step is to understand how LLMs are already being used, and they definitely are, even if the security team does not know about it, and prioritize risks that are critical for your use cases." Adam Dennis of Antigua Recon said, "We should also consider creating an adversarial AI model, which would work in conjunction with any other AI to enforce a simple set of moral/ethical standards for AI. Let's give old Isaac Asimov a try with his 3 laws of robotics and go from there." And I added the 3 laws because, for a reminder for everybody who's listening, a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And lastly, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. Isaac Asimov. Very prophetic, and we still listen to them today. All right. Have you been adhering to the Isaac Asimov laws of robotics yourself, Jeff?
I can't comment on that on advice of counsel, but what I can say...
What, you have killer robots over at LinkedIn?
Again, can't comment one way or the other. What I do in my spare time is my business, David. But I'd also just point out, as a fan,
just invite me to your garage. I want to see the projects you're working on.
As a fan of Asimov, every one of these stories that relies on the 3 rules ends up going awfully and brings into question whether the 3 rules are actually very good, which I think is sort of a metaphor for this kind of discussion. These are great. And we should absolutely, find a way so that everybody who's building LLMs or other AI technology can agree, hey, this probably shouldn't hurt somebody either physically or impugn their copyright licenses or their technology or their likenesses or, damage people's democracies and thinking. But it's harder than that, as it turns out. And I think where we're at right now, we should probably start a little more simply and just, hey, how do we provide a paved path in our organization for people to use and experiment just a little bit with AI so they can learn what's going to be useful for the business and not? And I think that is on people like Jarek and I to help figure out, how do we enable experimentation in a safe way so that nobody's going to get harmed up front, and we can figure out how this will disrupt our business in a positive or negative way before we start really clamping down on the controls.
So, Jarek, I know you're very brand new where you are, but I don't know if you did in your past job or it's even been discussed in the few days you've been at your new job. How are you looking at this in terms of letting the employees have a safe space?
When it comes to AI and having a safe space, it really just comes down to how you want people to use it, to the first point that was made. I can't speak to how my current company is doing it at the advice of counsel. I like your phrasing, Jeff. But what I really find is that we usually lump large language models into one category, but I see them in at least 2. You have the one that we talk about, the public models like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and Bard, but there's also the private models that organizations are exploring using their own data in the public cloud usually. And they each have their own risk profile and associated mitigations. And to Sandesh's point, I hope I pronounced your name right, Sandesh, somebody in your organization is already using it, but that's usually in bucket 1. The real question I don't hear enough about is who is in bucket 2. That's where the real innovation is and where the real transformation is for organizations.
I'm sorry, bucket 2 being?
Building it yourself, private AI models. That's where you have complete control of the algorithms as well as the data that the model is trained on. And that is going to now put the burden of ethical and reputational and explainability on you. And those are risks that cyber people typically aren't used to talking about.
And I think there's no answers right now, but let's just talk about, how would you just begin a discussion of how do we explore this? I guess it's the question of, how do you explore this to understand what you're dealing with, right? I mean, where would you begin that sort of exploration?
Yeah, I think the first gentleman put it pretty clearly. What are the use cases? How do we plan on leveraging generative AI? Of course, once again, you're going to have your public AI model approaches, but what are we doing to level up our organization? And that's usually going to be something that we're building privately for ourselves.
What are the complaints?
Kristen Bianchi of ThreatTrick said, quote, today, GitHub Copilot is behind an average of 46% of a developer's code across all programming languages. I don't know where that comes from, but all right. Where is this open source code derived and what licenses are attached? I have CISOs reaching out to me each week with concerns because their devs are using these tools but are completely blindsided by their inability to locate the original author within these code snippets. Yuri Soldatenkov of Kemper Development Company said, quote, a big issue is being able to verify human versus AI speech similar to how we have phishing-resistant MFA today. We need to have AI-resistant verification. Well, that I'm going to tell you, That last one is the $64,000 question, isn't it, Jeff? AI resistant verification?
Kind of. I'm really kind of unsure of how I think about this. I'm going to tell you out of the bat, I agree. It would be great, especially at this phase of AI discovery that we're on, this journey, to have something that can detect whether I'm interacting with an AI or not. But the security practitioner in me just says, like, it shouldn't matter. My process or my infrastructure should be robust enough that regardless of whether it's AI or a human trying to pull one over on my help desk technician or my login services, I should be robust enough to resist if it's fraud. And I think this is a reminder that AI accelerates all these timelines of where we thought, oh, we don't have to think about that technology, protecting that technology a certain way because it's going to be years before anybody can successfully attack us at scale. And I think AI is the thing going like, nope, we can do at scale attacks cheaply and easily now. So it's time to go think about all those things you sort of wrote off in your risk assessments.
Is there maybe, Jarek, it seems like kind of the fun way to do with this, and a lot of people who are in security say is red teaming. Like maybe some little AI effort red teaming would be a valuable effort. Yes?
I can see that in the future. And, if you really look at AI, at the end of the day, it's an efficiency and quality accelerator. We use it for ourselves, but our adversaries, they're going to do the same thing. We've already seen it with Worm GPT. And just like our organizations, the bad guys are using it to their advantage. And the scale of their attacks are going to grow. The accuracy and the quality of their attacks are going to grow. But I actually predict we're going to start seeing some startups combating AI-based attacks with AI-based attack disruption. And the real question is, who's going to win that innovation battle? As an eternal optimist, my money's on the good guys.
As it should be. And yes, we at CISO series are, because we're looking at AI as for production models, but we don't know what we don't know yet. So we are just doing this sort of slow education process, which we have found to be the best tool for us. But at the same time, and one of my producers actually brought it up, says we can't just sit here and educate ourselves and not question how we're going to use it. So there is this balance, Jeff, I'll throw it to you, of yes, educate yourself, but keep questioning yourself how to use it. Have you tried that?
I think every new technology is like this. If I go back and think about things that were very transformational at the time, like Napster and BitTorrent and Bitcoin, they all kind of went through this process where up front we went, wow, this is amazing. Let's think of all the promise. And then there was sort of the gradual descent into like, well, there's trade-offs in these things. But in the meantime, people didn't stop and wait for it to be perfect before they thought about how this could really create a lot of value for them as a business. Now, there were some, like with Napster, for example, there were some downsides and regulation and legal people got involved. But like the whole idea of peer-to-peer sharing, like that exists in almost everything we use today in one way or another, just not in a way that violate copyright law. So I think we're at that phase with AI right now where we should be leaning into it. We should be thinking about how this will transform things for us as organizations that need to do work where this can add value. But I think you're exactly right. You always got to keep in the back of your mind, like, where's the line on this and where is the risk?
I think the Napster example was a great example to use because I think about Napster, and in fact, I was at ZDTV. I was the first one to actually break the Napster story when I was working at ZDTV at the time. And what that showed is there is severe demand for digitally distributed content, specifically at that time, music, because it was easy at the time. It was very hard to distribute video at that time. And today we have all these music services, most notably Spotify, which would not have existed if there wasn't that sort of demand breakthrough that Napster allowed us to see. ChatGPT, Jarek, is that demand breakthrough right now, although it's not an illegal service or a service perceived to be illegal like kind of Napster was at the time. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. As an industry, we're sometimes slow to adapt, whether it was BYOD, whether it was cloud, whether it was SaaS. We've seen so many trends come and go, which makes us a little bit more resistant to change. But generative AI is different. It's more like the iPhone. It's here and it's poised to transform our organizations, whether we secure it or not. That train has left the station, but it hasn't fully reached full speed. So it's our time to hop on now.
I think that's such a great point because it is also so obvious up front that this is going to make big strides and big differences in every business and every organization. It's just a matter of figuring out how. So I think to Jarek's point, we can't say no. We have to figure that out now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's a one time like everyone's in agreement. Like, yeah, this is it. The question is how, and we don't know. But I think what scares everybody, because we've just watched it in the past year, like I think about the image programs like Midjourney, which I was introduced just over a year ago. The speed these things are accelerating is a little scary.
It is. But like, this is why I'm in this place, right? This is why I'm in this space specifically. I'm an engineer at heart. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And I want to find the intersection of where things like this help a business and where we can protect ourselves and others from them being exploited. And I think there's no better place to be in the service of others than to figure out how do you help companies adapt transformational technology while protecting people that could potentially be harmed by it.
Before I go on any further, I want to share some really interesting research from our sponsor, SpyCloud, about what we're missing when it comes to ransomware protection. What predicts the likelihood of an attack? So the team at SpyCloud has poured over the data from ransomware attacks, and what they found should give you goosebumps. And get ready for this. Listen, nearly a third of ransomware victim companies this year were infected with info-stealer malware beforehand. Okay, so you may have heard of some of these info stealers like Raccoon Stealer, Vidar, Redline. SpyCloud found that these stealers increase the probability of ransomware even more. So if they're in your system, chances are pretty high ransomware is coming next. So clearly, we all need to pay closer attention to info stealers as an early warning signal from ransomware. SpyCloud specializes in recapturing the data stolen from info-stealer-infected systems and alerts your team to take action before compromised authentication data can be used by criminals to target your business. Now, my favorite thing about their solution is that you get data that's actually actionable and relevant to your business. And it feeds into your existing security tools for fast remediation. Now, it's pretty crazy what these folks can tell you about your existing InfoStealer exposures. They've got a free tool you can use to check it out at spycloud.com/CISO. So just go to spycloud.com, but add the /CISO, CISO, you can do that. Be sure to go there, grab the new research, and check your exposure so you can act on it before the criminals do. Remember, that's SpyCloud, spycloud.com/CISO.
How do we approach governance?
Ogaga Umukoro of Newtopia Inc. said, quote, organizations need an AI policy. There needs to be specific guidelines on what not to use generative AI for. These LLMs are basically spitting out the information we feed it with. In a matter of time, proprietary information will be fed to the public. We need to redefine our security goals to include tech tools such as ChatGPT. Doruk Yalsensoy of Cyber Hour said, quote, let's not forget the importance of user education and awareness. Training employees about AI-related threats and safe practices can significantly reduce the risk of human-induced vulnerabilities. And lastly, Eric Silberman of USDA, quote, NIST publish AI risk framework with lots of links, pages, guidelines, articles, ideas, and checklists. It's a whole program. So somebody's already written something up here. So how far can we get down this AI policy? It sounds like it's going to be pretty much a living document. Yes, Jarek?
Yeah, I'm absolutely a proponent for an AI policy. It should precede the training. And I would also suggest potentially having two different policies, one for your public AI consumption, another one for your private developed models. You know, the policy needs to define the approved use cases and the measures needed to leverage Gen AI in a risk mitigated manner, especially how the organization will enforce it. Eric brought up the NIST AI risk framework, which was established specifically for the AI we build. And we talk about public AI risk all the time, but the policies that talk about how you're going to protect your models. It's extremely difficult to, check the different boxes to patent your models. So the burden of protecting that IP, it's really on cyber. And you're not going to have a lot of legal support outside of maybe privacy. So measures like mitigating the risk of model theft or model poisoning or model drift or data leakage. These are all things that you're going to have to think about when you're building your own models. And most cyber professionals have never had to do anything like that. Not to mention, they still have all the same stuff: web application firewalls, monitoring, access control, all the usual, things are still on their list when it comes to securing new built AI models.
Jeff, by the way, you could ask ChatGPT, create a good use AI policy for me.
I'll go over to Bing and figure this out afterwards. But it's such a good thing that Jarek and I's budgets always go up with every additional threat, and that we're not just figuring out how to manage this along with everything else.
That is great. By the way, is your budget tied to the threat, meter? So just there's a direct correlation between the two of them, Jeff?
No, it's not.
Oh, so you were being facetious when you said that?
I don't know if you've heard of these grammatical devices, things called sarcasm or cynicism and irony. No,
that's what you were using. Because what you described actually sounded wonderful.
It would be wonderful. And hey, board members, public company board members, if you want to talk about how to balance investment in security based on current threats, come look me up. I'll do your CISO a solid. No, really, I think this is hard. And I think Jarek's got it exactly right. Like, there's really two categories that we as security leaders have to think about. There's our consumption of AI models, which is the thing I think right now our third-party risk approach to using any kind of SaaS service or integrating any kind of third-party libraries or service into a product we're already building, we're actually pretty good at that. It's the latter that we're not in tech great at yet, which is we're building our own models, we're building our own technology and piping it into these things. The thing that most of us are good at, though, is taking an approach that's very practical and deliberate, thinking about building something trusted by design. And I know
that's a key line right there.
This is a really important part is, you're going to get it wrong. But the idea is you approach it trying to build the most trustworthy thing you can build, which means both building trust in the sense of you're not going to abuse anybody's data, you're not going to misuse it in a way that you didn't articulate or give them choice about, and trust in the sense that if it starts to harm people, they have a way to flag that or report it or manage that, and that you're going to respond to that, right? And I think at a base level, that's what people are doing as they build these things now. That's what scrupulous people are doing as they build these things now. And that's the part where we're going to learn as we go. And I'm going to be frank, like, plenty of companies are going to screw this up front. And I think the NIST framework is a really great way to sort of assess what other people are doing. Asking hard questions about any product that you're building or using is really important right now. But just in general, I still go back to, we've built new things before. This one feels very transformative, but at the end of the day, we just have to root ourselves in principles.
Jeff, I love that you used the word trusted. I built a AI security framework for people that aren't going to have that big NIST document, and it was actually called Trusted. The T is for transparent, R is for robust, T is for unbiased, S is for standardized, T is for traceable, E is for ethical, and D is data-driven. And in combined, if you take that approach, it's actually a lot easier to structure your approach to mitigating these AI risks.
A fantastic opportunity to build something safe with something Jarek has helped with.
What's the next step?
Varun Grover of Veritas Technology said, quote, generative AI can be a double-edged sword, like a lot of new technology. But by proactively leaning into security and compliance, we can ensure the longevity of this breakthrough technology. Something that I've been thinking about is the future of predictive cybersecurity that can preempt cyber attacks proactively versus being reactive. Minority Report, Isaac Asimov. Same thing. We're going to be jailing people before they commit crimes. Is that it? No, probably not. Chad B. of United Patriot Coin said, quote, consider an AI tool that monitors our communications in real time, intercepting phishing or social engineering attempts on employees. It's akin to the spam and phishing email detectors we use now, but applied to live voice conversations. I think there's going to be opportunities because if they're using AI to create this stuff, we can use AI to detect it, being that we could create the same thing that they're trying to get us with. What do you think, Jarek?
Completely agree with you. We kind of talked about this earlier. We're in multiple different AI arms races. Nation states want to be the leaders. Organizations want to out digitally transform their competition. And cyber teams are trying to stay ahead of that looming threat. Today, AI is the dumbest it's ever going to be.
That's a good line. It's the dumbest it's going to be. There. And the same thing the next day, the dumbest it's going to be that day because it's only getting smarter. Good point.
It's growing in intelligence and capability over time. And as it evolves, those use cases are going to change with it. And if the knowledge and the skills of the humans harnessing it don't, we're going to be at a disadvantage. So I really challenge every CISO to leverage every capability at your disposal and get your teams up to speed, learning how to extract the value out of this disruptive technology. Mark my words, November 30th, AI versus AI cyber duels will happen one day, and humans will continue with their one-on-one battles on the sidelines. But this is the future of cyber war.
But here's the interesting thing, and I've mentioned this before on one of these shows, is I keep reading about how, if you put private information, they're going to hack and get the information out. And I go, wait, no. If you put private information in, normal users will get it out. That's the thing with these generative AI programs is when your data goes in, it comes out just by normal use. And that's very different than what we've dealt with before, Jeff.
Yeah, and there have been some really interesting examples recently where, you can trick some of these chatbots to just tell you about bugs, about keys, credentials, all kinds of things. And it's really, one has to respect the craft involved in crafting prompts to get them to sort of give these things up. But that's why this is unusual. Usually, if you're interacting with something, it's a one way, it's a post. I'm posting something on my feed, or I'm entering a chat, I'm interacting with a human. But again, I think to Jarek's point, the AI is really dumb right now. AI is going to get better, but so are the bad guys. And so it's going to be interesting to see this ladder its way up. I do think there's going to be a lot more uses of AI for good than there are for evil. And my sort of faith in humanity is such that we're going to find a way to reasonably battle a lot of these emerging threats. But right now, it's a little scary.
It's the unknown.
It's always the unknown.
I don't think we've had a situation where the looming unknown is as big as this one. And this is in cyber. Yes? What do you think?
There was a period of time when COVID first occurred, and I didn't know how bad it was going to be when people rushed home. But I knew that was going to be for a short period of time till we figured it out. I don't know if there's a figuring it out with AI, because as it gets smarter, we need to hurry up and get smarter with it. And that is a fun challenge, but also scary at the same time.
I will say this, that I haven't gotten as smart as AI has in the past year, personally. I have not. Now, Jarek, by the way, we've come to the portion of the show where I ask you and Jeff, which quote was your favorite and why? And you may choose one that AI generated, if you so choose. Which quote was your favorite?
I want to go back to the quote that was about Copilot and how 46% of our code is being developed from Copilot. Not necessarily my favorite, but I definitely want to call out the fact that that's a really high number, but let's assume that's accurate. The developer using Copilot should still be held accountable. No different than a lead pilot on your plane going from San Francisco to LA. If it has issues, he's the lead. Developers cannot blame Stack Overflow when it gives them bad advice, so they can't blame AI Copilot either. It's really no different, except for GPT is faster, but less accurate on a consistent basis.
So yeah, if you're using a tool, you got to check the validity of whatever the tool is. Copilot, Stack Overflow, whatever the heck. Jeff, what's your favorite quote and why?
I'm going to go with Sandesh, who started us all off talking about the first step is to understand how LLMs are already being used. And I'm just going to underscore this, my emphasis, and they definitely are, even if the security team doesn't already know about them, and prioritize the risks that are critical for your use cases. I just go back to basics here. If you're in an organization and you've said, nope, nobody should use AI until we decide what the policy is, I've got news for you. Everybody is already using AI and they have no idea what the policy is. So you have to start somewhere simple. And if you absolutely, working on something critical that you don't want people using external AI, you're going to have to do, like Jarek talked about earlier, and provide them an internal tool to use. Everybody is using it. And if you think they're not, they are. Provide people a paved path, provide them an on-ramp to do things safely. It'll go along much better than just trying to say no.
Excellent point. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. I want to thank our sponsor, SpyCloud. Thrilled to have them back on board. Go check out what they've got at spycloud.com/CISO. Get your free tool to check your info stealer exposure and check out their report that will give you lots of great information about the early warning signs that ransomware is coming. Jarek, I want to make a little plug for you. You have an awesome LinkedIn Learning class. I'm going to have you explain it all. I have seen a little bit of it. It's pretty darn spectacular. And Jarek, and I'm going to take credit here for all of your success on podcasts and in LinkedIn Learning. May I take all your credit for all of your success?
Anything that's occurred over the last 3 years was solely because of David Spark.
Thank you. Oh my God.
It is now on
we
wax.
have that quote. We have that quote where we're playing it over and over again.
I didn't hear him say anything about sharing residuals with you, though. So,
damn. Jarek, tell us about the LinkedIn Learning class.
Absolutely. So we've talked about it. AI is here. As security professionals, it is our job to figure out how to enable the business to use it securely and mitigate the risks of it. And I created a LinkedIn Learning course that should be available, if not now, in a few weeks from now. And it gives you the tools to write your AI policy, as well as mitigate both public and private risks, and try to make it as accessible for the beginner in cybersecurity all the way up to the executive that just wants to better understand it. It's made to enable all of you guys to do AI securely.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad you came on our show, talk about it, that you came to us with a fountain of information on this very topic. So we greatly, greatly appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody else for your contributions as always, and for listening to Defense in Depth.
We've reached the end of Defense in Depth. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss yet another hot topic in cybersecurity. This show thrives on your contributions. Please write a review, leave a comment on LinkedIn or on our site, CISOseries.com, where you'll also see plenty of ways to participate, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@CISOseries.com. Thank you for listening to Defense in Depth.